So without further ado, an evening with Frank Finizia.
I saw the hat going around, I wanted to say no tipping, but then I realized it wasn't for me.
You did that?
The little sign I put up front here was something that is kind of the keynote of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And if you can't read it from the back, discipline is the soul of an army. It makes small numbers formidable, procures success to all of the weak, and esteem to all. That's George Washington in a letter of instructions to the captains of the Virginia regiments, 29 July 1759. You remember that George Washington was active in his Virginia militia and in the French and Indian Wars. And that was his attitude toward the discipline of the army. Let's remember what he started out with as an army. He was given command of the militia troops that were encircling Boston after the battles on Battle Road, Lexington, and Concord. It was a makeshift army. It was a militia army. These were farmers, farm boys. The cities that existed, the few cities existed, were laughable in size by our present day standards. They were 30, 40,000, maybe 50,000, and there were very few of them. These farm boys and farmers, maybe 3-4 times a year, would drive to the local village or crossroads to exchange farm produce, extra livestock they had raised, buy staples like coffee and salt. They walked on soft earth, plowed fields. They walked like farmers. They did not present a martial air. They were good with a weapon. They knew a shotgun. Some of them knew rifles. They served in their local militias, which were very important in the years prior to the Revolutionary War, because there was always the constant threat in whatever colony you were in, maybe not Rhode Island and Connecticut, of the frontier Indians that the settlers had displaced. And a fence given on either side could lead to a local skirmish or war. Plus, there were rivalries, like, say, Connecticut and Rhode Island. Remember, those were two colonies that split off from the Massachusetts Bay Colony because of religious differences. And it was at one time legal to shoot a Rhode Islander on sight by Massachusetts law. They hated each other. Militias were at the call of the church bell, which was the alert, the cell phone alert of the day. When that church bell rang, you knew there was a fire, or an Indian raid, or a raid from, the Hatfields or the McCoys, or whatever the rival gangs were, rival towns and cities, wherever they happened to be. And you grabbed your musket and went out and responded. But it was a makeshift situation. The local militia leaders were elected. They were the prominent men of the town, who probably had very little, if any, military training. But on training day, they were able to put a half a cask of rum out, or a barrel of beer. And it was more like a softball picnic than it was military training. This is what Washington started the war out with. Not a regular army, not a professional army, not a trained army, not a disciplined army. Men would come and men would go as they wished. The man that came to his rescue was an odd individual, one of many foreigners who, for want of a war in Europe, and interested in pursuing their military career went where there was a war in America. You've got the Kosciuszko and Pulaski, the Polish ancestry. Everybody knows Lafayette and L'Enfant, the military engineer, the man who designed Washington, the layout for Washington, D.C., L'Enfant. The French. If you had to be in Washington's position, remember, he was dealing with an alliance of 13 competitive colonies, each looking out for their own interests. The Continental Congress was probably more like the United Nations today than it was anything that we would consider a national legislature. And they could really only request. And they could say, Massachusetts, give us 15 regiments, and Rhode Island, give us 1 regiment, because based on your population. And none of those states were particularly eager to send their sons off to fight in Virginia, or Pennsylvania, or New York, or God forbid, South Carolina. Remember, you had conflicting religions, too. You had conflicting social attitudes. And there's some regiments you couldn't put next to other states' regiments, because they'd end up fighting each other. He had to be very diplomatic in all sorts of little things. When the regiments were lined up in a battlefront, everyone wanted the place of honor on the right side of the regiment, on the right side of the line of troops. That was the fist. Washington says, I'm going to line them up the way God placed the colonies on this earth, on this continent. And he started with the northern colonies right down to the southern colonies. How can you argue with God? He had to create a national army. And with the French volunteers that came, Polish volunteers that came, who had careers in the European wars, he had professional soldiers. And he would put them in charge of brigades. He'd take, 5 Connecticut regiments and 5 New York regiments and put them under a foreign officer who didn't have a responsibility, who wasn't to the states, who wasn't trying to get elected governor of the state, who didn't want to have to tell the parents and the communities, well, the regiments have been wiped out. They won the battle, we're winning the war, but your son's not coming home. He'd never get elected. He wanted votes. A lot of the regimental the colonels of regiments were politicians. And they weren't military. He needed these foreign officers. And he needed someone to create an army for him out of this crazy quilt of groups. That man was Fredrick, probably, Wilhelm von Steuben. He was born Friedrich Wilhelm August Heinrich Ferdinand Steuben. The original birth name was Friedrich William Ludolf Gerhard Augustin von Steuben. In September 17th, 1730. So he's in his 40s when he gets here. He died in 1794, by the way. He's commonly known as Baron von Steuben. The von came later, and so did the Baron. He was a Prussian, and later served as an inspector general, major general of the Continental Army. He's credited with being one of the fathers of the Continental Army and teaching them the essentials of military drills, tactics, disciplines, And he wrote, "Regulations for the Order and Discipline of the Troops of the United States." The book that served as the standard United States drill manual until the War of 1812. In other words, as long as there were muskets. Smoothbore muskets. He served as General George Washington's Chief of Staff in the final years of the war. I have a copy, a reproduction, and there's a paperback copy in the back that Alan's holding up that is available on Amazon for about $9. This is what it would have looked like when it was published and distributed to the troops in '78. We'll go into more on that later. You can see it had fold-out illustrations of how the camp was to be laid out. We'll get into that. I'll show you some of the intricacies of what he had laid out. But to an awestruck 16-year-old private, the tall, portly baron in the long blue cloak was as intimidating as the god of war. He seemed the perfect personification of Mars, recalled Ashadel Green years later. The trappings of his horse, the enormous holsters were worn on the saddle, not on the body, for pistols. His large size and his striking martial aspect all seemed to favor that idea. And he wore a big gold star, fancy star on his uniform given to him, I believe, by Fredrick the Great. Some of the baron's aura was artifice. Von Steuben had never been a general, despite the claim of supporters who recommended him. A decade past his service as captain in the Prussian army, Von Steuben, at 47, filled his letters home with tall tales about his glorious reception in America. But the baron's skills were real. His keen military mind and charismatic leadership led George Washington to name him the Continental Army's acting Inspector General soon after his arrival at its camp in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. In less than 2 months in the spring of '78, Von Steuben rallied a battered, ill-clothed, near-starving army. They went from a ragtag collection of militias to a professional force. Von Steuben was probably the most important of all the volunteers from overseas who flocked to America to join the revolution. It was von Steuben's ability to bring to his army the kind of training and understanding of tactics that made them able to stand toe-to-toe with the British, he says. Remember, the British had a pretty high opinion of themselves. They had conquered and colonized a lot of the world. One of the largest overseas empires. He was born to a military family in 1730. At first, his last name was the non-noble Steuben. He was 14 when he watched his father direct Prussian engineers, his father was an engineer, in the 1744 siege of Prague. Enlisting around the age of 16, von Steuben rose to the rank of lieutenant and learned the discipline that made the Prussian army the best in Europe. Its greatness came from its professionalism, its hardiness, and the machine-like precision with which it could maneuver on the battlefield. The Prussians were the feared ones for what they could do on the European battlefields. In 1775, the American Revolution broke out. Von Steuben's boss, the Hechingen Prince, ran out of money. Von Steuben, his salary slashed, started looking for a new military job. But Europe's great armies, mostly at peace, didn't hire him. In 1777, he tried to join the army in Baden, but the opportunity fell through in the worst possible way. An unknown person there lodged a complaint that von Steuben had taken liberties with young boys in his previous job. The never-proven, anonymously reported rumor destroyed von Steuben's reputation in Germany So he turned to his next best prospect, America. In September 77, the disgraced Baron sailed from France to volunteer for the Continental Army, bankrolled by a loan from his friend, French playwright Pierre-Augustin Carreton de Beaumarchais. A letter from America's diplomats in Paris, Benjamin Franklin and Silas Deane, vouched for him and reported that France's Minister of War and Foreign Minister had done so too. But Deane had falsely claimed that Von Steuben was a lieutenant general and exaggerated his closeness to Frederick the Great, the greatest public deception ever perpetrated in a good cause. Why? Only the highest recommendation would make an impression back home in Congress. Congress, desperate for volunteers earlier in the war, had been overwhelmed by unemployed Europeans eager for military jobs, and the number of officers from overseas had begun to stir resentment among American-born officers. Congress had sternly warned they wanted no more foreigners arriving in America with contracts for brigadier and major generalships in their trunks. Though Von Steuben didn't exaggerate his accomplishments to Franklin and Deane, he went along with the story once he got to America and added some flourishes of his own. At one point, he even claimed to have turned down a position with the Holy Roman Empire to serve the United States. Von Steuben landed in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in December 77 with 4 French aides to translate for him, and a large dog named Azor. His exaggerated reputation spread fast. In Boston, he met John Hancock, who hosted a dinner for him, and chatted up Samuel Adams about politics and military affairs. Next, Von Steuben headed to York, Pennsylvania, the temporary American capital while the British occupied Philadelphia. Aware that the Continental Congress had soured on foreign volunteers, Von Steuben offered to serve under Washington and asked to be paid only if America won the war. They took the deal and sent Von Steuben to Valley Forge. He's got skin in the game. What Steuben discovered was nothing less than appalling. He was confronted a wrecked army. A less courageous or less bankrupt man would have quit on the spot. Unlike the American forces in New York, who had beaten the British at Saratoga in the fall of '77, the army in Pennsylvania had suffered a series of defeats. When they lost the Battle of Brandywine in September '77, the British had seized Philadelphia. Now, following common military practice of the day, they camped for the winter. Everybody camped for the winter. It's hot enough in its spring, summer, and fall. In the winter, you just hunkered down and tried to survive. Valley Forge, their winter quarters, was nearly as punishing as battle. Hastily built huts, cruel temperatures, and scarce food. Has any of you visited Valley Forge and seen the hut? They would dig a hole in the ground about 6 by 6, and then on top of that hole they put about maybe 4 courses of logs for a log cabin and a roof. They were literally sleeping in the ground, in a trench, in a hole, in a pit. That's what they had. The Baron found soldiers without uniforms, rusted muskets without bayonets, companies with men missing and unaccounted for. Short enlistments meant constant turnover and little order. Regiment sizes varied widely. There was no replacement system. You may have marched out of wherever with 400 men, but by the time you arrived somewhere between desertions and sick, you might have 300. And then as time went by, more desertions and more sick and later wounded from battles. Regiments had 100 men in them that were nominally 400-man regiments. There was no replacement system. method sizes varied widely. Different officers used different military drill manuals, leading to chaos when their units tried to work together. If the Army had to fight on short notice, Von Steuben warned Washington he might find himself commanding 1/3 of the men that he thought he had. The Army had to get into better shape before fighting resumed in the spring. So Von Steuben put the entire Army through Prussian-style drills, starting with a model company of 120 men. He taught them how to reload their muskets quickly after firing, charge at the bayonet, march in a compact column instead of miles-long straggling. Meanwhile, he wrote detailed lists of officers' duties, giving them more responsibilities than in the English systems. The Baron wore an 8-pointed silver star on his chest, etched with the word Fidelitas. "Squad, halt!" he shouted. Some of the few English words he knew. He walked among the 100 men in formation in Valley Forge, adjusting their muskets. He showed them how to march at a steady 75 steps a minute, then 120, a quick march. When their discipline broke, he swore at them in German and French, and with his only English curse, "God damn it." He would then call one of his aides over and say, "Swear at them for a while, I'm going to go smoke my pipe." And he'd go take off for 20 minutes and then come back. He was a hands-on trainer. Soldiers gaped at the sight of a German nobleman in a French-style black beaver felt hat, drilling poorly clothed troops. Though Von Steuben raged and cursed in garbled mixture of French, English, and German, his instructions and presence began to build morale. If anything, the curses contributed to Steuben's reputation as an exotic character who was good for a laugh now and then. But he built morale. He built cohesion. These men had been through some difficult training, and now they could be proud of themselves as a unit. Although the Baron was appalled at the condition of the Army, he was tasked with making over. He soon developed an appreciation for its soldiers. The genius of this nation is not in the least to be compared with that of the Prussian, Austrian, or French, Von Steuben wrote to a Prussian friend. You say to your soldier, "Do this," and he does it. But I'm obliged to say to the American soldier, "This is the reason why you ought to do it." And he does it. And he does it well. Not because he's commanded to, because it makes sense to him. He treated the soldier as a person, not a serf, not a stick to be kicked, or a cow, or a dog to be led around on a leash. He treated them as people. And I think that more than anything won soldiers over to him. Off the drilling field, Von Steuben befriended the troops. A lifelong bachelor, he threw dinner parties rather than dine alone. One night the guests pulled their rations to give Von Steuben's manservant the ingredients for a dinner of beefsteak and potatoes with hickory nuts. They also drank salamanders, which was whiskey lit on fire, flaming shut. Well, they drank. You gotta realize the condition of the water that was available to them. It wasn't safe. As W.C. Field says, you know what fish do in it. Beer, whiskey were safer to drink than water. And it was watered down. It didn't have a high alcohol content like we're used to today. Steuben's eclectic personality greatly enhanced his mystique. He trained soldiers who at this point were greatly lacking in proper clothing themselves in full military dress, swearing and yelling at them up and down in German and French. And when he was no longer successfully recruited Captain Benjamin Walker, his French-speaking aide, to curse at them for him. His instructions and methods have a familiar ring, nor is this strange when we consider that much of what is done today stems from his teaching. To correct the existing policy of placing recruits in a unit before they have received training, Von Steuben introduced a system of progressive training, beginning with a school of the soldier, with and without arms, and going through the school of the regiment and through the officers. There was no basic training. There was no boot camp in those days. Each company commander was made responsible for the training of new men, but actually instruction was done by selected sergeants, the best obtainable. Warfare in the 18th century was a comparatively simple matter. Once the battle was joined, combat was at close range. Massed fire, where rapidity of firing was of primary importance. Accuracy was little more than firing faster than the opposing line. Much of the regulations dealt with the manual of arms and firing drills, but battle was close order drill, and speed of firing could only be obtained by drilling men in the handling of their firearms until the motions of loading and firing were mechanical. Firing was done in 8 counts and 15 motions. The technology of the day led armies to be equipped with smooth-bore muskets, essentially a 12-gauge shotgun barrel, 75 caliber, if you count it. It shot a round lead ball the size of a gumball, with penny gumball machines. And it didn't fit the barrel tightly. It wobbled down the barrel. I fired these weapons in competition. They were nothing like the rare, but extremely accurate, rifles. A rifle, flintlock rifle, there are stories in the Revolutionary War of hitting a target at 2,000 yards. Do that? No.
Yeah, no, you're right.
200 yards, I'm sorry, 200 yards. 200 yards, sorry. That's modern 2,000 yards. 200 yards. There's an officer on horseback. The sniper in the tree got him on his first shot. But flintlock rifles were slow to load. They were precision instruments that took a while to estimate the wind, the moisture, the temperature, what breezes were blowing across the ground between you and the target, how old your powder was, how strong it was, how much powder you should use. You fired maybe once every 2 minutes. And by that time, whoever you're shooting at, if you didn't hit him, was on top of you, hacking you apart with a bayonet or a sword. It was not a mass weapon. It was used very effectively as a sniper tool, but it was not a mass weapon. The regiments lined up shoulder to shoulder, 200 men across 2 deep. In fact, in the Prussian army, the men did not look down the barrel of their muskets. They looked at the officer standing on the end of the line. And he would have a cane like yours, much like yours. Hold it up. Show me where to fire. He wouldn't show them this way or that way. He would just give them the elevation. They would match the elevation of his cane down the line, and he would say fire. It didn't make a difference if he shot that man, or that man, or that man, or that man. But he hit one in that line. That's all they could do. That's all they could hope for. That he wasn't too far to the left or too far to the right. It didn't make a difference. As long as you weren't too high or too low, you hit something. Because the other guys were lined up in a solid wall like you. It wasn't until much later in the war that they realized standing toe-to-toe at 75 yards firing muskets was a waste of time. Fire your volley, then run at them with your bayonet. It does not have to be reloaded. The early part of the war, the U.S. used the bayonet mostly as a cooking skewer or tool to dig rather than as a fighting instrument. Steuben's introduction of effective bayonet charges became crucial. For instance, in the Battle of Stony Point, where soldiers attacked with loaded muskets, just so they wouldn't You're going to run at them. They're going to fire a shot. Don't stop the fire shot. Just run at them. You'll survive better if you keep running at them. They'll run away. If someone's running at you and you're standing still, you're at a disadvantage. They have a momentum. They're going to knock you over. What can you do? You back off. You run away. As von Steuben's work progressed, news of the United States treaties of alliance with France reached Valley Forge. Washington declared May 6, 1778, a day of celebration. He asked von Steuben to ready the army for a ceremonial review. He had distinguished Frenchmen there. At 9 a.m. on May 6, 7,000 soldiers lined up on the parade ground, rank by rank with not a single straying step. The battalions swung past George Washington and deployed into a double line of battle with the ease and swiftness of veterans. Then the soldiers performed a feu de joie, a ceremonial rifle salute in which each soldier from the right to the left, one at a time, bang, 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 bang. Just the whole 7,000, one at a time. And it displayed a couple of things. If you were an astute military man, you'd watch and see how many misfires there were. If everybody did it without a misfire, they're a pretty good group. If there were a lot of misfires, then you'd see them bang, 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 bang. You knew they were a sloppy bunch of yahoos. So that was always, it was a ceremonial salute, but it was also a showing off. The plan was formed by Baron von Steuben, and it succeeded in every particular, wrote John Lawrence, an aide to Washington. The Baron's lessons didn't just make the American troops look impressive in parades. Under his tutelage, they became a formidable battlefield force. 2 weeks after the celebration, the Marquis de Lafayette led a reconnaissance in force of 2,000 to observe the British evacuation from Philadelphia. I believe Greene was with him, Nathaniel Greene. When a surprise British attack forced Lafayette to retreat, von Steuben's compact column formation enabled the entire force to make a swift, narrow escape. They did an orderly retreat, as opposed to everybody run for the hills and small groups getting cut off. At the Battle of Monmouth on June 28th, the Revolution's last major battle in the northern states, American troops showed a new discipline. They stood their ground during ferocious fire and bayonet attacks, and forced the British to retreat. Monmouth vindicated Steuben as an organizer. The Army's new strength as a fighting force, combined with the arrival of the French fleet off the coast of New York in July of '78, turned the tide of the war. The North at that point was pretty secure. The French fleet landed in Newport Harbor. They let off a number of French regiments, and the North was pretty much, the British just said, the heck with them. We don't need them. We've got the better part of the colonies. The southern colonies are more profitable for us. We'll get them later on. The first results of von Steuben's training were in evidence at the Battle of Barron Hill in May of '78, then again at the Battle of Monmouth in June of '78, and then by serving Washington headquarters, first to determine that the enemy was heading for Monmouth. During the winter of '78-'79, Steuben prepared the book, Regulations for the Order and Discipline of the Troops of the United States, commonly known as the Blue Book. Its basis was the training plan he had devised at Valley Forge. He dictated it, he wrote it out longhand, during the winter of '78, as he could only speak and write a small amount of English. Steuben originally wrote the drills in German, the military language of Europe at the time. His secretary, Duponceau, then translated the drills from German into French, and the secretary for Washington translated them into English. They did this every single night, so Washington could command the soldiers in the morning. Colonel Alexander Hamilton and General Nathaniel Greene were of great help in assisting Steuben in drafting a training program for the Army. The Baron's willingness and ability to work with the men, as well as the use of profanity in several languages, made him popular among the soldiers, as we said before. The Southern Campaign. In 1780, Steuben sat on the court-martial of a British Army officer, Major Andre, captured and charged with espionage in conjunction with the defection of General Benedict Arnold. He later traveled with Nathaniel Greene, the new commander of the Southern Campaign. He quartered in Virginia, since U.S. supplies and soldiers to the new commander would be provided to the Army from there. Steuben would help in the defense of Virginia with approximately 1,000 militia fighting a delaying action at the Battle of Blandford. During the spring of '81, he aided Greene in the campaign in the South, culminating in the delivery of 450 Continentals to Lafayette in June. He was forced to take sick leave, rejoining the Army for the final campaign at Yorktown, where his role was as commander of one of the 3 divisions of Washington's troops. In 1783, General Von Steuben joined General Knox at Vales Gate near West Point. In the fall of '82 and early '83, he moved to Verplanck at Mount Gilead, across the Hudson River from Washington's headquarters in Newburgh, New York. Steuben gave assistance to Washington in demobilizing the Army in '83, as well as aiding the defense plan of the new nation. In '83, Steuben presided over the founding of the Society of the Cincinnati, and he was discharged from the military with honor in March 24th, 1784. If you aren't familiar with the Society of the Cincinnati, it's named for the Roman citizen Cincinnatus, who, when Rome was under attack by Goths or somebody, Hannibal, I don't remember which, the Senate sent a delegation to him and said, "You're a great general. We're giving you dictatorial powers over every man and everything in Rome. Defeat the invader. Save the city." Cincinnatus put down his plow, took over command of the army, defeated the invaders, put down his sword, and went back to his plow. He had complete dictatorial power, and he gave it up, setting the model of the citizen soldier, of the citizen statesman. He wasn't a career politician. He didn't take the position like so many other people. A general saves the city. Okay, I'm going to make me king now. Call me emperor. He said, that's it. I did the job. I'm going back to being a private citizen. And that's what Washington was approached at New Windsor in the encampment by the officers when he was disbanding the army. They said, why should we disband the army? Why don't we keep the army together? Why don't we make you king? He said, no. I'm going back to Virginia to my plantation. And the organization, the Brotherhood of former Revolutionary War officers, formed the Society of Cincinnati. Now, in his final years, when Steuben was given a number of honors, grants of land, estates confiscated from loyalists, somehow or other he managed to stay broke. And statues were erected in his honor. Cities were named for him. Counties were named for him. Retirement didn't really suit him that well. One of his final quotes was to one of his creditors, "My Jersey estate is advertised but not yet sold. From this, Walker shall immediately pay to you the money you so generously lend me, and all of my debts in New York will be paid. I support my present poverty with more heroism than I expended at all the clubs and parties renounced, I seldom leave the house. He eventually sold the New Jersey property to the son of a previous owner and remained with the family until 1909. And it remained with the family until 1909. The only remaining 18th century building that Von Steuben owned. He died on November 28, 1794 in his estate in New York. He did not marry. He had no children. He did not care much for his European relatives. He left his estate to his companions and aides de camp. Whom he treated as surrogate sons. There are many German-American festivals that are called Steuben Days. There was a stamp issued in his honor, and the Steuben Society. Warships were named after him. Captured German warships in World War II were named after him. One in World War I. He's honored with a statue in Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. He's been depicted in several popular movies and documentaries. The contribution is obvious and evident, and it was appreciated by the people at the time, from all the tributes afterwards, from his colleagues, from his superior Washington. Without him, well, would there have been another man who would have been able to organize the Army, put it on a professional basis? If it hadn't, would it have succeeded? Those are questions that history can't answer, but we can imagine that he was probably the fastest and surest way to getting a professional army that the United States had, and becoming the United States. The drill, I brought some stuff with you so that I can show you, if you'd like audience participation, if anyone would like to learn the drill and handle a musket of the day, a reproduction, not an original. He would first start with a soldier not under arms. In other words, he taught them how to stand. The first things he had to teach them was, I'll read his words, well, the manual's first. The position of a soldier without arms. He is to stand straight and firm upon his legs, with the head turned to the right so far that his left eye is over the waistcoat buttons. You didn't stare straight ahead, you look to the left. Correctly worn, the cocked hat is not worn square on the head. It's worn cocked over the left eye, so that when you stood properly, the hat was straight. The heels 2 inches apart, the toes turned out, the belly drawn in a little, but not without constraint, The breast a little projected, the shoulders square to the front and kept back, and the hands hanging down at the sides with the palms close to the thighs. This is not a farmer's posture. Farmers slouch. Soldiers stand upright. Remember the armies of the day, the British Grenadiers and the Russians. They didn't wear hats like this. They wore tall, pointed hats to make them look taller and more impressive. In fact, there's a story about the Prussians that their regimental coats the arms were short on the coats. Now some say it's because the tailor skipped them on the military contract. Others say it was done purposely to make them look like giants, to make them look like they were busting out of their clothes, to make them look bigger and more impressive when you saw them across the field. Theatrics. Woof. Attention, the soldier must be silent. Stand firm and steady, moving neither hand nor foot, except as ordered, but attend carefully to the words of command. This attention of the soldier must be observed in the strictest manner until he receives the word, rest, at which he may refresh himself by moving his hands and feet, but must not then sit down or quit his place, unless permitted to do so. Attention to the left dress. At this word, the soldier turns his head briskly to the left, so as to bring his right eye in the direction of his waistcoat buttons. To the right dress, the soldier dresses again to his right. That's the way they're lined up, left to right. The crew must then be taught the facings. To the right face, 2 motions. Turn briskly on both heels to the right, lining up the toes a little, lifting up the toes a little, and describing a quarter of a circle. Bring the right foot back to its proper position without stamping. The British are doing a lot of this. You just turned and adjusted your feet. To the left, 2 motions. To the left, whoops, it's hard to do in sneakers. It's easier to do with a well-fold shoe on grass. Boom. To the right about face, 3 motions. Step back with the right foot, bringing the buckle of the opposite the left heel. At the same time, seizing the cartridge box with the right hand, turning in a circle, and bringing the right foot back, at the same time putting the cartridge box. When the recruit is sufficiently expert in the foregoing points, he must be taught the different steps. The common step, soldier steps off with his left foot and marches with a free, easy, and natural step, without altering the position of his body or head, taking care to preserve a proper balance, and not cross his legs, but to march without constraint in every sort of ground. The officer must march sometimes at his front, sometimes at his side, in order to join example to precept. Halt, the soldier stops short on the foot, then advance, immediately bringing up the other without stamping. Quick step is also 2 feet pace, about 120 per minute, is performed on the same principle and same order. 120 steps is about a good marching band. I think it was Sousa march. The recruits, having been exercised singly till they have the proper carriage and are well grounded in the different steps, the officer will then take 3 men, placing them in one rank, exercise them in the different steps, and teach them march by files, which, being of great importance, must be carefully attended to. Observing the soldier carries his body more forward than in the front march, and that he does not increase the distance from his file leader. That's in the line ahead. 1, 2, 3, that would be a file. The oblique step, quick and coming. If you wanted to move the whole company or regiment that way, rather than turn them, march them, and turn them, you could do this. Or the reverse to the right. Marching obliquely to the right, soldier steps obliquely with the right foot, bringing the left up, and placing the heel directly before the toes of the right foot. Then it would just, you want to slide over. Position of the soldier under arms. Same as attention, soldier square in front. Okay. The left elbow up there, okay. The butt of the musket is at the hip, and it's nearly perpendicular. The elbow is in, and it's like this. And you notice, with the hat cocked over, it's behind the musket. If it were worn square in the front, you'd be hitting it. Another thing to notice, you want to watch an accuracy in a movie, there's room for the musket at the left shoulder arms. They carry mostly on the left, almost never on the right.
Why?
Just tradition. Just tradition. It was easier to work from the left. Okay, firing. From this position, which is where you started, to fire, you did this. This is poise. It's called poise, P-O-I-S-E. The finger down here on the spring, the hand here. So rather than read the awkward language, the next motion would be cock. After firing, it would be in this condition, okay, in this position. Cock is this. That's half cock. This won't go bang, don't worry. You bring it from here up to here, and you bring it to cock. Take aim is that. And there are no sights on the gun. That's a bayonet lock, not a sight. Take aim, and then the command would be fire. It would be, excuse me, the gun would be loaded with that, and you would be from half cock to full cock, and then fire, boom. All right. Then the next one would be and then from that, after you fire, the foot comes up and you go to this position, priming position. The next command would be half cock, which we did before, half cock, and handle cartridge. Cartridge box.
You know, your demonstration with the weapon reminded me of ROTC. We almost went through the same thing.
Okay, handle cartridge. The cartridge box, you have cartridges. You pull out the cartridge. The only physical requirements to be in the Army was that you have all your limbs and you have at least 2 teeth opposite each other. Because you had to bite the paper top off the cartridge. That's the way you took some of the powder and poured it in this little trench here, this little groove. It's called a pan. Poured enough in there to fill that pan up, and then you closed the frizzy. Then, shut pan, then charge the cartridge. You turn the hand and put the cartridge into the muzzle. Now, the cartridge is a paper cylinder, pasted if it's British, tied with string if it's French, with a musket ball in the bottom of the tube. You crumple the paper and put it down the barrel. Charge the cartridge. And then draw the rammer. Then ram down. And you would have to push it because it would get stuck. Especially the more shots you fire, the more residue built up in the barrel. And it would be a push. Return rammer. Sometimes they would just take it and put it to the ground. That was cheating. Because if you had to move, you lost your rammer. Return rammer. which point you bring it up to the shoulder. And then from there, it would be fire or do something. You know, whether it was order arms, present arms, but the next motion would be fire, and it would be that sequence that we went through before. The bayonet was mentioned. There's a triangular bayonet, which is outlawed because it makes a wound that really can't be stitched closed. And it made it a pretty good lance. I mean, it's the kind of thing that if someone were running at you with this, what would you do? Unless you had something, you know, you can't just push it away. I mean, it's a very formidable weapon to be looking at that. I don't want to go too long or bore you, or go into details that you're uninterested with, but I'd be perfectly happy to line you up as a training company and show you how they were trained and how they were lined up and how they were commanded. If 10 of you or 20 of you would be half a company. Then there was one woman.
Okay.
There was one woman who managed, there was one woman who managed to spend, I believe it was 3 years in the Continental Army in the 2nd Massachusetts Regiment. Her name was Deborah Sampson. And she later went on a speaking tour. She was pretty interesting. Nobody else wants to stand up, line up here? Come on. Nobody likes square dancing.
You cannot do anything to me that wasn't done to all.
It's been done before, right? Come on. We're going together, right? These guys are a bunch of wet blankets. Come on.
Form it up.
Come on, I need at least 10 of them.
Remember, finger and thumb on the seams, right?
There we go. Now you get to see the plates here. These were originally drawn by the guy who designed Washington, D.C. And if you look over my shoulder, you can see each one of these bars is a company of 40 men.
You go. Bye.
Company formation would be, which plate is that? Get the right plates in. And then I seem to be bumbling, and I am, I guess. That's what I'm showing.
Normally would be in order, all right?
You think, wouldn't you?
Not front.
The underlinings you see there in the writing, that's done with a lead pencil. A lead musket ball that's been hammered down. So I can write underline and make my notes as a junior officer. Come on. I'm trying to find a reference here and I can't. What?
Are you ready to wait for
I'm sorry. Let's do something else then.
start cursing at us like
Yeah, I'm sweating already.
You run up here and tap us in the chest, say, what happened, son? You have a cave?
Remember what he said for your position. Your feet slightly apart, rest easy in your stance, stomach in, chest out a little, hands along the side. Just that's the easy rest. Okay? And get a musket here.
That's right.
Yes, accept it. Feel the weight. Okay? thumb and first finger in front, 3 under, that into your hip, and that straight up. And your left eye over your buttons. You're looking at me. Put your right hand down. Don't drop the
I
muscle.
don't think I put that.
Sure you can. Just get a little bit further up and then back. There you go. There you go. Just tip it in.
Oh, boy.
You do it.
Got good.
It should be almost falling, but you shouldn't have been falling. It should be falling.
I love it. Everybody hit the floor.
Oh, that was cute.
Finger in front, into your hip, your shoulder. There you go.
Now you're
Straight up.
shoes.
There you go. All right, you got it. Almost tipping forward. You feel that?
You got that band-aid off, though.
So air first. There you go.
This guy's just a flash.
Bring your hand back. There you go. Very good. Well done. Excellent. You're going to be the sergeant.
No, thanks.
Back, there you go. If you bring your hand back far enough, it works. There you go. There we go.
Right there?
That's about it. Now you gotta be straight up. I have a picture in my photo album of the reenactment group that I went, when we went for our inspection to be admitted to the Brigade of the American Revolution. And there's 6 people like this. And from the way the pictures happen, just by accident, it looks like there's one man with 1 musket. You have to look down to see all the feet. They line themselves up perfectly. Without it, I marched them up. And when they ended up in front of the officer, they were in a perfect line, and the muskets, it looked like 1 person. It was better than the Rockettes. We could have never done that again in a million years.
I have to tell you, a 74-year-old man, that's pretty doggone heavy.
It is.
Yes, it is.
How'd you like to have to go everywhere with that in your hand? If you were marching, on the trail, you carried it like that.
That makes the M1 carbine feel like a BB gun.
How much was that weigh?
Just tell you.
Right?
How much was the weight of that?
I'm sorry.
How much was the weight?
About 10 pounds?
Oh,
Who wants to
I think
estimate?
it's more than that.
About 10?
16 and a half pounds. I'd say 15 or 15.
I'd have to look it up.
No, it's heavy, big time.
It's heavier than that one.
About 15 or 20.
Pass it down. Pass it down. That's the French musket.
Yeah, that feels better. It feels better.
It's a little bit lighter, a little bit. It's not, that's 75 caliber, that's 69 caliber.
It's easy to get your hand on around it. That's one thing.
That's a traditional style, that was used for over 130 years in the British Army. That's enough.
How much would y'all say it weighs since y'all are?
I'm sorry, again, I'm terrible player.
I was asking them how much did they think that gun weighed since it.
Anybody else have a
was
question on the weight?
It's about 16 and a half pounds.
He says 16 and a half. Wow.
I'd say that was
This
12.
one's a little lighter than that one. I think so, pounds.
I'd say 12, 15, 16.
Okay.
That was it.
How much do you think it weighs?
Yeah, I say about 16, 17 pounds.
And then, of course, when you ran out of everything, there was always this.
Yeah.
And believe me, they did that. I mean,
I did that at my house.
you did what you could with what you had. Okay. All right, now.
Can we go at each?
No, just hold attention. Hold attention, all right. Let's try the faces. Remember what I said. A right face is this and this. Well, you do it all the way. Okay? You're going to be doing, a right face is this and this. You turn, you stop, you turn, okay? Well, you turn and then you adjust. Turn and then you adjust. Turn and then adjust. Turn and then adjust. All right? Left face, just the opposite. Turn and adjust. Now, interesting, if you got enough room, the right about face. You're going to be turning to the right, and you're going to end up facing that way. You move your foot, turn all the way around, and then adjust. So you're going to take a good step back, like that. Turn around, and then adjust. There you go, you got it.
I'm gonna fall over if I do that.
Now, you can turn around front just for informal. When the British when the British dismissed their troops, they did it with a right about face. Because your natural inclination is after you've done the right about face, is to walk this way, away from the officer. They're afraid of their troops. They made them do a right about face at dismissal. The Americans, when you dismissed, was right face. Just a right face, not a right about face. And it was just that little bit of a difference, the democratization. A company would be 10 men with 10 men standing right behind them. There was none of this kneeling business, okay? When it came time to fire, you fired like this. It did wonders for these guys' hearing, but that was not of primary importance at that time, okay? They would be standing there, and the men behind them, the men behind him, would be like this. The kneeling stuff came much later.
Well, if the hearing didn't get you, probably the blindness would.
There was a lot of smoke, a lot of residue. You ended up with black lips from the black powder opening the cartridges. You'll see my uniform, the cuffs are black from having fired. Okay, 5, 10, 10 behind you. That's a section. This man and that man are filed. That's a rank, that's a rank. To a rank and file. At the end of the line of 10 and 10, giving you a section of 20 men, there would be an officer on one end, a lieutenant on one end and a sergeant on the other. And then the next one would have a captain on one end and a sergeant on the other. So there was an officer and an NCO for each section of 20 men. And there might be another captain behind them
There's no
in
way.
charge of that company. 10 of those was a regiment. That's how you get up to 400 men in a regiment. Okay, guys.
Okay.
You're dismissed. Thank you. Now we go for questions. If anybody's got
Right,
questions.
face.
I'd like to show you the book a little more intimately. If anybody wants to look over my shoulder or sit with me and go through the pages and explain some of the stuff that's in here. But other than that, I'll take questions.
Well, I have a question. You know, what you were showing of the way that they drilled then, it's an awful lot like the way they drill now. Is that an off-take of what?
Oh, yes. Everything's a refinement of something that went before it. There's very few new ideas in the world. Nowadays, they probably still teach close order drill and basic training, even if you're going to be sitting at a computer for all of your military career. For what reason? If you teach a kid, okay, I used to teach. Why do we have to learn history? I said, stop for a second and think about this. I could make up a language. They did for Star Trek. Klingon, somebody invented a language. And people study and learn it. The studying and learning a skill exercises the mind. If I want to develop my muscles for running or punching, I don't necessarily run and punch. I may go to a gym and work out on a machine that I just do this with, or I may do sit-ups or pull-ups. A football player doesn't put points on the board doing squats, lifting weights, running around the track, but those exercises exercise the muscles that will put points on the board. It's an exercise for the mind to learn a skill. So close order drill, it develops human cohesion, because they are all doing it together. They learn that they've got to help each other. They're not going to get over this hurdle unless they all get together and help the guy who's not catching on. One way or another, either they beat the crap out of them when the lights are out and say, stop being a wise, some of you have had experience, stop being a wise guy and give the sergeant a hard time, and we're all going to get extra laps or extra push-ups. They smarten them up amongst themselves. Or they help them. They say, this is the way you can do it. Do this, try this, try that. It builds unit cohesion to learn a new skill. Close order drill, marching in a formation. Then you get the pride of accomplishment. Some people, their life circumstances are such that they never felt that they've accomplished anything in their life. Not that they're poor, they may be very rich, they may have grown up in very comfortable circumstances, but they may feel, I didn't accomplish this, everything was handed to me. They want to feel some self-worth, mastering a skill. As abstract, as pointless as it may be, they accomplish something. They didn't just get a participant medal for trying, they accomplished something. They could now march as a cohesive unit, they're all in step, they all move. One of the things that was a huge inducement, recruiting in any of the European armies and the American army, was you probably got your first new set of clothes. Remember, it's an agrarian society. If you were the oldest, you got your father's hand-me-downs. If you were the second oldest, you got the oldest hand-me-downs. If you were a girl, you got your mother's hand-me-downs. You remade dresses for older people into dresses for younger kids. Everything was passed down. Everything was remade into something else until it disintegrated. You got your own new suit of clothes. If in the modern army, well, the wool regimental coat, really not that practical, but it was stylish. The cocked hat, not that practical, but it was stylish. By 79, Washington had realized that the wool coat, one, was expensive, and it wasn't that practical, and he could do much better giving them rifle coats, rifle jackets, rifle shirts. They were practical, and it scared them out of the British, because they thought they were all riflemen. They thought they were all crack shots. So that getting your own uniform with brass buttons and this here and a medal there, that you didn't win, your unit won in the Civil War, but you're entitled to wear it because you're a member of that unit. You got a battle ribbons and a rifleman badge, and you went home, and the guys on the corner that used to call you Dippy, wow, he made something of himself. It was, you didn't walk like this anymore. You walk like this, you walk like a soldier. So those kind of things that they seem pointless in basic training, or in any training, all serve to bring the one unit cohesion. It goes back to the Civil War. They would send the soldiers home in the winter, but they came back because they wanted to be with their buddies. They voluntarily came back. They walked the road back to the war. They didn't have to be called up, picked up, driven in a truck. They wanted to be with their comrades. Those friendships, those hardships suffered together builds a bond. And having a nasty drill sergeant or a demanding officer, or being asked to do things you didn't think you could do. You know, even the modern army, it's very carefully calculated. The things they ask you to do, they know you can do eventually. They can build you up to do them. You just never tried them before and you're afraid of failing. They will coach you through them. They will get you through it. If you fail basic training, you have a serious problem, either physical or mental. And they don't want you in the army anyway.
If you're going to break,
It's possible that you can.
if you're going to break, they want you to break in basic. If you're going to break, they want you to break in basic. They don't want it to be where it's costing lives.
Yeah.
Now, Von Steuben, he was here in South Carolina, wasn't he?
I don't think he came to South Carolina. Virginia was about the farthest he went, supplying grain. He may have brought a regiment down to Lafayette when they were, I don't know which Carolina they were in. That was mentioned. But I don't know if he ever set foot in South Carolina.
Also, too, the militia didn't receive the same training as the regular Continental Army, right?
No, the militia's training was whatever the state mandated, which wasn't much. It was bring your own weapon, bring your own equipment, bring your own powder, bring your own provisions. We're going on a hike. And you've seen like in, what's the Mel Gibson movie where they do a combination, Kings Mountain, Compounds, whatever that, Patriot. Green and Lafayette were smart. We know that. What they do is they put the militia in a line, and they say, look, we only want 2 shots from you. Load your musket, fire, reload, fire again, and then run away. Run straight backwards. Militia could do that real well. It gave the British a false sense of victory. Oh, these guys are running from the field. And as soon as they fell back, the regulars fell into place in front to block the British. And the British now come over the mountain and they see a regular line in front of them prepared to fire volleys and stand their ground. At which point the militia goes, hey, we're winning! And they run out on the flanks and attack the British from the flanks. It was masterful. It was a masterful use of the forces he had in his hand. The militia would always break and run.
Like they did at Camden.
They were amateurs. You don't expect the most out of amateurs. You go back to when you go back to the regular army, you have to go back to the Spartans, whose whole culture was to develop the strongest army. The whole society was built on that. Weak or deformed children were killed at birth. And I think around 7 years of age, they were taken from their families and sent to military schools, where they were trained. They fought each other, they trained, they worked out. And the Spartan army was based on one thing: you need each other. The movies that portray these one-on-one duels, baloney is the polite word. The Spartans worked for the same reasons the Prussians worked, same reasons the Roman legions worked, the same reason the Continental Army and the British Army worked. They stood shoulder to shoulder. And you know that big shield that the Spartans had, that big round shield? It only covered half of their body. The other half was covering the man next to them. And they were relying on this man here, the back of his shield, to cover him. If he ran away, you were screwed. If I ran away, he was screwed. They were trained to stay together, and as long as they stayed together, nothing could break through them. All they did was jab between the spaces of the spear. How could you get close to them? Same thing with the Romans. The Romans had shields. They had a different style shield that covered just themselves. But they stood shoulder to shoulder and just poked through the spaces. And the barbarians ran up against them, slammed them against the shield, and got speared. And they tried to jump over him, and there was a line of guys behind him that speared him. It was the working together. If you work together, if you stay to keep the line, you'll survive. If you break and run, Spartans used to say, mothers would say to their children about the war, come back on your shield, with it or on it. If you came back with your shield, it meant you hadn't run away. If you came back on your shield, that was the stretcher they carried your dead body. If you came home without your shield, what's the first thing you get rid of when you're running away? The shield is worthless. You drop it. You drop your shield on the field of battle because it hinders your running away. You were a coward if you came home without your shield. Nobody wanted to be a coward. Remember, up until World War I, up through World War I, regiments were recruited on a local basis. Some would come into the center of Simpsonville and beat the drum and ring the church bell. And people would come in on, they come in on market day, and they'd sign you up. You're the second son, you ain't going to inherit the farm, and you're tired of seeing the back end of a mule, and you see this guy with a fancy uniform with buttons, new clothes, and got $1 a week, $12 a month, or whatever the hell the pay was. Okay, Dad? Go ahead. One less mouth to feed. I got 3 other sons. and you form the band of brothers.
One of the things you were talking about,
I'm terribly hard of hearing, I apologize.
how many of y'all are aware of what GI means?
General issue, government issues.
What does that mean? That means all one, all the same.
Yep, uniformity.
All one,
Well, that's,
all the same.
first thing in modern basic training is to tear away your identity.
That's right.
They give you a shave, they take away your clothes. That's your identity.
All one, all the same.
You're no longer a name, you are private, or recruit, or whatever. I'll stay for questions. If anyone wants to look through the book with me, I'll show you some of the finer points of what was written and drawn on font. Any other questions?
Good job.
Oh, thank you.